Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
15 years of marriage and Mark still didn't know when to shut his damn mouth. That's what I thought as I watched him swirl his third glass of champagne, eyes already glassy and tongue loose, leaning over the little table I had spent too much time setting up to make our anniversary feel like something. Something more than what it had become: lukewarm routines, buried resentment, and too many quiet dinners where we both scrolled through our phones like strangers stuck on a delayed flight. But tonight I had tried. I really had. The roast was perfect, candles flickering just right. I even wore that emerald silk dress he bought me 8 years ago and hadn't noticed since. And for a moment, I thought maybe he was feeling the same nostalgia. Maybe tonight, just for tonight, he'd look at me the way he used to. But then he said it. He leaned across the table, greasy grin on his face like he'd just won a bet. He tapped his glass against mine and said, "You know what, Carla? I should have married your sister." Just like that. 7 words, carelessly tossed like cigarette ash onto a gasoline floor. And he said it like it was funny. Like it was some charming punchline to a joke we were both in on. I didn't blink. I didn't ask him to repeat it. I just poured him more champagne, all the way to the rim, and smiled like I hadn't just felt something inside me snap, like a bone under pressure. There was no screaming, no glass throwing, no dramatic storming out. That's not my style. I've learned over the years that real rage doesn't make noise, it waits. It listens. And then it does what needs to be done. Quietly. He laughed again after he said it, wiped his mouth with the cloth napkin, and slouched back in his chair like a man too comfortable in his own skin, too sure that he'd never lose the house he pissed on. "I mean, no offense," he added, shrugging. "You've been great. Really. But Elena, she's just—" I already knew what Elena was. She was the golden child. The one with the big laugh, the perfect teeth, the kind of body that made men forget their wives were sitting right next to them. Even at my own wedding, she turned more heads than I did. My father, drunk and sentimental, had told her she looked like a movie star. Nobody told me that. I looked like the woman people marry when they want stability, not fire. Mark married me because I grounded him. I kept the bills paid, the calendar organized, the sex consistent enough not to complain. Elena was fire. I was the damn fireplace. I mean, he mumbled, chewing on another bite of steak I had cooked to medium rare, just how he liked it. Elena would have never let me get this soft. "You know." I nodded. I smiled. I topped off his champagne again and watched his reflection in the candlelight, his smug face flickering like a dying bulb. I could have thrown the whole bottle at his head. Could have screamed and told him that Elena had once thrown up in my car after sleeping with a married man from her office. That she hadn't held a steady job in 4 years. That her last boyfriend broke up with her because she drained his savings account with crystals and energy healing retreats. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I said, "You're right. She probably wouldn't have." He raised his glass to that like I had agreed to a pact. Later that night, he passed out on the couch. Left the dishes on the table, shirt half unbuttoned, feet on the coffee table I had just cleaned that morning. His mouth hung open like he was waiting for more to spill out. I stood in the doorway for a while, just watching him. Not feeling sad or angry. Just still. Like when you stare at a fire long enough and realize you don't want to warm yourself anymore, you want to let it burn everything down. I walked upstairs, stepped out of that green dress, and sat at my desk in nothing but my slip. The house was quiet except for the soft wheeze of his breathing below. I opened my laptop, entered the password he never bothered to learn. And there it was, an old folder I hadn't looked at in over a year. I'd called it Plan B back when I first started doubting us, when I caught him texting someone named Mandy, with a Y, and he told me she was just a coworker. Plan B was full of passwords, financial records, screenshots, even copies of old messages he'd deleted from his phone, not realizing I had synced it with the family iCloud. I clicked it open. The first thing I saw was a document labeled Custody Strategy. I wasn't planning on using any of it. Not really. But now, something felt different. Like maybe the fuse he lit tonight had finally reached the charge. I didn't cry. I didn't feel sorry for myself. I just started typing. Quiet fingers. Cold mind. Steady pulse. 2 days later, my phone rang just after lunch. I was folding towels. White ones, fresh out of the dryer. My sister's name lit up the screen, and before I even answered, I knew something had happened. Her voice was shaking. I hadn't heard her cry like that since her divorce 5 years ago. Carla, he tried something. I didn't say anything, just waited. He came over, she said. Said he wanted to talk. I let him in. I shouldn't have, I know, but I didn't think he'd actually. Her words tumbled out like broken teeth. My stomach didn't twist. My hands didn't shake. All I said was, "What exactly did he do, Elena?" She sobbed. He tried to kiss me. Grabbed me. Said it didn't have to be a secret. I looked out the window as she cried. The sky was clear. Blue. Ordinary. And I said, in the calmest voice I've ever heard come out of me, "He got what he wanted, didn't he?" "No," she gasped. "God, no, I shoved him off me, Carla. I swear on Mom's grave. I would never." I stopped listening halfway through, because I already knew the answer. Not to what she was saying, but to the question I hadn't even let myself ask until right then. This wasn't new. This wasn't the first time. It was just the first time one of them said it out loud. I don't remember the first time I realized I was the background in my own family, but I do remember the feeling that came with it, the tight, hot little knot in the center of my chest when everyone's eyes flicked to Elena as she entered a room. Even when it was my birthday, or my graduation, or later, my own damn wedding. It wasn't envy exactly, not the green and ugly kind they write about in magazines or throw around in therapy offices. It was more like resignation. Like I had quietly accepted my place behind her, the way one accepts traffic or taxes, or the fact that coffee will never taste as good as it smells. Back in high school, Elena was the type of girl who could get away with skipping class and still get voted homecoming queen. Teachers loved her. Boys followed her like stray dogs. Our parents always said we were so different but both so special, which we both knew was code for Carla's the smart one, Elena's the pretty one, as if women weren't allowed to be both without creating some sort of cosmic imbalance. I studied hard, got straight A's, learned how to fold my pain into ambition. She coasted through life on charm and perfect cheekbones, tossing her hair and laughing that loud, breathy laugh that made people lean in like it was some kind of secret. At my wedding, while I stood at the altar in a dress I picked after 3 agonizing fittings and 2 breakdowns in a boutique dressing room, my father leaned over to my mother and said loud enough that my maid of honor heard it and told me later. I honestly thought it would be Elena up there first. He meant it as a compliment. He always did. That was the thing about my family. The cuts were always accidental, the wounds brushed off with a chuckle and a refill of wine. But I never hated her. I didn't. Not then. Not when we were girls, not even when she moved to Chicago for a year and came back with stories of lovers who bought her jewelry just because. I didn't even hate her when she made a joke once, half drunk at a Christmas party, that she should have been the one to marry Mark, since he always laughed harder at her jokes. I just smiled, swallowed it, and went back to the kitchen to baste the turkey while she got to sit on the couch and look stunning in a low-cut red sweater. That was the thing with Elena. She never tried to be cruel. She just was, without meaning to be. Like a flame that doesn't know it's burning you. After she called me, I sat on it for a full 24 hours. Let the words settle, sift through me like smoke curling under a door. Then I drove to her apartment, a little over 30 minutes away, nestled between overpriced juice bars and dog grooming spas that cater to people who name their poodles after French philosophers. She buzzed me up before I even finished the second knock. Her face was puffy, eyes rimmed red, and she was wearing an old hoodie that might have been mine, judging by the faded coffee stain near the zipper. We sat on her couch, the same white one I helped her pick out last spring when she was going through her Scandinavian minimalist phase, and she told me everything. Or what she claimed was everything. He showed up after brunch, she said, voice tight, fingers playing with a throw pillow like she could pull the truth out of its seams. Said he wanted to talk, that he needed clarity. She laughed bitterly at the word. Clarity. Like he's some damn monk trying to find himself. I said nothing, just nodded and let her go on, because I knew if I spoke too soon, I'd say something I couldn't reel back in. He said things haven't been right with you too, she continued. That he's always wondered, you know, what it'd be like with me. And then he leaned in, tried to kiss me. Said it didn't have to be a big deal. And you said no, I asked, not as a question, but as a checkpoint. Of course I said no, Carla, she snapped, voice cracking in that wounded little sister way. I shoved him off and told him to leave. He looked so offended, like I'd betrayed him somehow. I believed her. At least I believed that she believed herself. But something in my gut twitched when she said the timing. She claimed it happened on Wednesday the 12th. Only Wednesday was the 15th. I didn't say anything, didn't correct her. But it was there, like a rock in my shoe, that tiny inconsistency that can split into a canyon when you're not watching. I hugged her before I left. She cried into my shoulder, and I rubbed her back like I used to when we were kids, and she'd fall off her bike and act like the world was ending. Only this time, I wasn't comforting her, I was studying her, watching the way her eyes flinched when I mentioned Mark's name again, noticing the way she avoided saying certain details unless I asked. I don't know. Maybe it was paranoia. Or maybe it was the sound of my own intuition finally clearing its throat. She walked me to my car, told me she loved me, said she'd never let anything come between us. I smiled and promised the same. Then I got in, shut the door, and let out the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding since she opened hers. Halfway home, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. No text, no words, just a photo. A photo of me and Elena, sitting on her couch from just a few hours earlier. Taken from outside the window. And right below it, a winking face. No name, no signature, no clue who the hell sent it. But I knew one thing for sure in that moment. I wasn't the only one keeping secrets. There's a specific kind of silence that settles into a marriage after the first real betrayal, and it's not the cold, bitter, fight-filled kind people imagine. It's quieter than that, more sterile, like the moment after a glass falls, but just before it shatters. That's where Mark and I were living now, suspended in the moment between impact and consequence, though he didn't know it. Or maybe he did, but pretended not to, the same way he pretended not to see dishes piling up, or how my voice got flatter every time I said I'm fine. The thing is, he thought he was clever. That little comment about my sister, the champagne-soaked confession, the sleazy half-drunk logic of a man who believed a woman's silence meant submission, he thought it would pass. Thought I'd chalk it up to too much booze and bad judgment, maybe pout for a few days, and then crawl back into our shared bed with fresh sheets and forced forgiveness. And maybe once, years ago, I might have done exactly that. But not now. Not after the pieces began clicking into place, one after the other, in that slow, horrifying way you realize a movie you've seen before has a second ending. So I played my part. I cooked him dinner 3 nights in a row, made his favorite ribeye with garlic butter, mashed potatoes whipped smooth with real cream, and that awful box chocolate mousse he liked because it reminded him of his mother's lazy Sunday desserts. I even poured his wine for him, laughing softly at his tired jokes, resting my hand on his arm while we ate like a couple from a toothpaste commercial. I wore the red silk dress he used to beg me to wear to parties, the one that hugged my waist and made me feel like someone else, someone bold and sharp, not dulled down by years of calendar reminders and laundry piles and the endless, invisible labor of being the steady one. "I've been distant," I told him one night, curling against his side on the couch as some mindless show droned on in the background. "I'm sorry. I think I just needed time." My voice was soft, controlled, the same tone I used when handling a skittish dog or a pan about to boil over. He kissed the top of my head and said, "I get it, babe," like he was some generous saint and not the kind of man who could kiss his wife while still fantasizing about her sister. By Friday, he was practically glowing. He shaved, wore cologne again, and even suggested we take a trip, just the two of us, to somewhere sunny where we could reset. I smiled and said that sounded perfect. Then I told him I wanted to have a quiet girls' night with Elena first, to clear the air, start fresh. Maybe open a bottle of wine and pretend we were still those giggling girls from high school who used to sneak sips of Smirnoff in the backyard and dream about adult lives that never looked like this. He nodded, probably thinking a night away from me would mean I'd come back more pliable. Men like him never expect you to look them in the eyes while you twist the knife. Elena came over around 8 on Saturday, wearing leggings and a chunky sweater, hair tied back in that casual way that looks effortless, but takes effort, because that's always been her. She brought a bottle of Merlot, though I'd already opened a Pinot, and we settled into the living room like nothing had ever gone wrong. We talked about our mother, about work, about that time I almost broke my ankle at her bachelorette party trying to dance in 4-inch heels. We laughed. We cried a little. I told her I forgave her, not for anything specific, but just in case she needed to hear it. She cried harder after that. And then, just before I stood to refill our glasses for the 3rd time, I leaned in to hug her. Her phone buzzed on the cushion between us. Without pausing, without looking flustered or rushed, I reached over and picked it up, sliding it in with the same motion as the embrace. She didn't notice. Her face was buried in my shoulder, and her breath was hiccuping from the wine and the tears. She didn't even feel me press the side button. Face ID unlocked it immediately. It took me less than 15 seconds. Photos. Messages. Cloud backup. I knew what I was looking for, though I didn't know if I'd find it. But there it was. Right near the top of her downloads, one audio file, for minutes long, time-stamped from the week before. I didn't listen to it, not right away. I just sent it to myself, along with 3 pictures I recognized instantly. One of her in Mark's car, another of a text that read "You drive me insane," in all the best ways, and a third of the 2 of them, at some patio bar, drinking margaritas. She was laughing. He had his hand on her knee. I slipped the phone back into her lap before she even noticed it had been gone. That night, after she left and Mark was already asleep upstairs, snoring like a broken engine, I sat at my laptop again. The folder labeled Plan B was still there, only now it had a sibling. This one I named something simpler. Something that sounded innocuous, like it belonged to a bored woman organizing digital clutter. I called it insurance. I uploaded the files, pictures, voice memos, text screenshots, even a few surveillance snapshots from the private investigator I'd hired 4 weeks earlier when Mark's behavior first started to shift in that slick, oily way cheaters always think is subtle. He never knew I saw the Uber charges. Never knew I found the receipt from the florist. He said they were for his mother, but she'd been dead for 3 years. Every file, every image, every lie now backed up in the cloud. Accessible from anywhere. Shareable in seconds. I sat back, staring at the little progress bar until it turned green. And in that quiet, humming space where everything finally made sense, I whispered, "You should have married my sister, huh? Let's see how well you handle what you did get." Mark always believed that appearances could buy you a second chance, that if you smiled wide enough and shook the right hands and dressed in a pressed shirt with clean shoes, people would forget the cracks running underneath your skin. So when I suggested we host a small gathering, a sort of reconnection party to show the world we were back on track, he jumped at the idea like a man offered a redemption arc in the final act of his little drama. He shaved, cooked, vacuumed the rugs without being asked, and even strung up a few lights on the back patio, the kind he used to say were a waste of money because who the hell needs ambience in their own yard? I let him do it all, smiling like a wife who was finally back in love, like I was grateful for this renewed version of him, all while knowing exactly how the night would end. We invited just under 20 people. A few of Mark's work friends who had only met me in passing, but shook my hand like I was a long-lost cousin, my cousin Wendy who never liked Mark but showed up because she sensed drama on the horizon, our next-door neighbors who brought a fruit tart and asked if we were still thinking of putting in a pool. I made a playlist, poured wine, and floated around the room with a hostess smile that had enough gloss to distract anyone who wasn't paying close attention. Elena showed up 15 minutes late, as always, wearing a tight black blouse and that red lipstick she only put on when she needed armor. Her eyes caught mine the second she walked in, and for a flicker of a second, I saw something raw behind her smile, guilt, maybe, or fear. But I kissed her cheek, handed her a drink, and said, "You look great," because tonight wasn't about settling scores. Tonight was about exposure. Mark was glowing, absolutely beaming like a man who'd managed to convince himself that the storm had passed. He clinked glasses with anyone who would listen, pulled me in close for a few staged kisses, and told the same story twice to different groups about the time we got lost in New Orleans and ended up at a drag show. I laughed at the right moments, touched his arm like I meant it, and excused myself just before the real moment arrived, slipping into the living room with the casual grace of someone adjusting the music or checking on snacks. The USB drive was already in my pocket. I had tested everything twice that afternoon, made sure the file names were scrubbed clean and the presentation would auto-launch once inserted. All it needed was a curious hand and a flick of a button. I didn't do it myself. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I waited until Mark suggested we all move inside for a little toast and some photos, and I passed the USB to my cousin Wendy with nothing more than a glance and a nod. She didn't know exactly what was on it, only that it would make things very interesting, and Wendy had never met a spectacle she didn't want front row seats to. The screen flickered as the TV auto-detected the input. People were mid-sip, mid-conversation, laughing, chatting. Then the audio kicked in. It was a recording, clear, unmistakable, Mark's voice, slurred slightly, but audible enough that no one had to guess. "She wants it, you know," he said, chuckling. "Elena acts all innocent, but I've seen how she looks at me. Carla doesn't have to know. Hell, if I played it right, I could probably have both." There was a beat of silence. No laugh track. No music. Just the quiet crackle of a room being rearranged by truth. I stood near the fireplace, sipping white wine, watching faces shift from amusement to confusion to horror. Elena was frozen near the back, one hand pressed against her mouth, eyes locked on the screen like she'd been sucker-punched. Mark was still grinning when it started, but by the third sentence, his face drained faster than a tipped glass. He lunged toward the TV like that would help, fumbled with the remote, tried to kill the file, but I had disabled every control but power, and by then, the damage was done. There were gasps, someone muttered, "Jesus," and someone else whispered, "Was that real?" Elena dropped her wine glass. It didn't shatter, it thudded, rolled, spilled red across the white rug like a wound opening. She left before it ended. Didn't say a word. Just turned and walked out the door, heels clicking like a metronome counting down to something none of us could stop. Mark stood in the center of the room, arms slightly raised, like he thought someone might still come to his defense. No one did. The silence around him wasn't angry, it was disgusted. Quiet, damning disgust. He tried to speak, to laugh it off, but nobody was buying it now. A man caught in the act always wants to pretend it's a misunderstanding. This wasn't. Eventually, the guests made excuses and left, most without saying goodbye. A few looked at me with pity, which annoyed me more than anything else. I didn't need pity. I needed space. And now I had it. Later, after everyone was gone and Mark had taken a shower in silence, trying to wash off the stink of being exposed, he came downstairs with wet hair and a weak smile, like he wanted to start the apology process with soft tones and half-truths. I was still sipping the same glass of wine. Didn't feel the need to switch to anything stronger. "Carla," he said, voice hoarse. I don't know what that was, but I cut him off before he could build momentum. When I asked, without looking at him, "Did you realize I wasn't stupid?" He stood there, stunned for a second, and I swear he looked younger in that moment, like the coward at the core of him had finally been unmasked. Carla, I didn't need an answer. Because deep down, he had never believed I was stupid. He just hoped I loved him enough to pretend I was. And now, that hope was dead. I didn't leave in the middle of the night like some battered woman in a movie, dragging a suitcase down a dark driveway, crying into my sleeve while headlights lit up the front of the house. That would have been too easy, too cinematic, and honestly, not my style. I left the next morning instead, just after the sun came up, when Mark was still upstairs pretending to sleep off the embarrassment like it was a hangover he could shake by noon. The truth was, there was nothing left for either of us to say that hadn't already been screamed in silence across that living room the night before. The party was over. The guests were gone. The house was quiet. And I had made up my mind weeks ago, maybe even years ago, long before the champagne, long before the slip-up, and definitely before that smug, drunken moment when he said he should have married my sister. I didn't slam doors or leave dramatic scratches on the walls. No suitcases stacked by the front door. No teary goodbye notes written in lipstick on the mirror. I left a single sheet of paper on the kitchen counter, typed neatly and without sentiment. It said, "Don't call me. Don't try to find me. You knew what you were doing. Now I know too." That was it. No signature. No tears. Just the end of a very long, very stupid chapter. But before I walked out of that house, I made one small stop. The home office, third drawer down, where we kept the bank statements. He hadn't noticed, of course, that 6 months earlier I had moved our joint savings into a trust under my name. He never paid attention to the paperwork, never read the fine print when we refinanced the mortgage last year, because he assumed I was the responsible one, the one who'd never do anything without explaining it 6 different ways. And that used to be true, until it wasn't. By the time he opened the account again, the balance would read 0. Every last cent had been moved. Legally, quietly, with a signature he'd given me months ago when I told him we were consolidating our finances to plan for retirement. I suppose in a way, I was planning for something like that. Just not the kind of retirement he'd imagined. I drove out of the neighborhood with the windows down, the cool air slipping through my hair like a long exhale. I didn't look back. Not once. There was no point in memorizing the angles of a house I no longer considered home. Mark could keep the granite countertops, the backyard grill, the 3-car garage he never parked in. All I needed was distance. And the money. I had earned both. 3 days later, I was unpacking boxes in a beachside rental in Florida. Not some rundown motel, but a breezy little bungalow with pale yellow walls and a porch swing that creaked when the wind blew hard enough. I sipped something cold with a wedge of lime and watched the tide creep up toward the shoreline, not thinking about Mark or the way his voice cracked that last night when he finally realized I'd never play dumb again. I didn't need to think about him. The world would do that part for me. Gossip spreads fast in small towns and even faster in families that love to whisper behind wine glasses. I hadn't spoken to Elena since the party. I figured we were done. Maybe not forever, but for now, there was nothing left to say. She made her choices and I made mine. And to be fair, I never blamed her. Not really. I knew Mark was charming in that soft, deceptive way that made women ignore the little red flags flapping behind his teeth. I knew how easy it was to be drawn into someone who knows how to say just enough of the right things at the right time, especially when you've been lonely long enough to forget what self-respect looks like. But I warned her. I gave her the truth without the venom. And if she chose to step into the mess anyway, Well, some lessons don't come free. But here's the part nobody else knew, the twist buried under all the drama and dirty laundry. I had hired a private investigator 1 month before our anniversary dinner. Long before Mark made his champagne confession. Long before Elena's tearful phone call. I had felt it in my gut, that old, sharp instinct that something was off. The late meetings, the guarded texts, the sudden desire to go to the gym at 6 in the morning when he hadn't touched a treadmill in 10 years. I wasn't looking for names at first. I just wanted clarity. Closure. But the PI delivered both. Photos. Dates. Times. A dinner receipt in a city they weren't supposed to be in. A photo of Mark holding the door open for a woman in a denim jacket who turned out to be Elena, her face tucked into his chest like a guilty secret. But I didn't confront either of them right away. I waited. I listened. I let them dig the hole themselves. The audio recording I played at the party? That wasn't from a drunken slip on his part. It was from a conversation he had in his car, alone, recorded through a tiny mic I had planted under the dashboard with the PI's help. He thought he was practicing what he'd say if he ever got caught. He had no idea the real confession came when he thought no one was listening. That's what always gets them. They think no one's listening. A week after I left, just as the Florida sun was settling into another golden evening, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Elena. 2 words. I'm late. I stared at the screen for a long moment. I thought about all the things I could say. The lectures. The insults. The empathy. The rage. But none of it mattered anymore. We weren't sisters in this story anymore. We were just 2 women trying to survive the same man in different ways. So I typed 1 sentence. Better you than me. Then I tossed the phone on the porch chair beside me, leaned back into the swing, and watched the sky turn pink above the water. Was I cruel or just smart? Did I manipulate her or did I free myself? You tell me. What would you have done?